Welcome Home with Barbara Beck, a Good Life 45 original production. Get ready to watch hope happen.
Hi everyone, I'm Barbara Beck and I'd like to thank you for tuning in to Welcome Home. Today we're going to be talking about a certain verse in Scripture from Luke 1:37, which says, "For with God nothing will be impossible." Pretty straightforward, right? Well, can we in fact take that verse literally, or is there more to it than meets the eye? Our guest later on in the program has written a book about his story and this very subject, and it's called "You Can't Do That." Yes, I can. Michael Attardi, a former NFL player, will be here to tell us more about his personal journey with God and how Michael has the biblical perspective that he lives his life by, and that's with God, nothing is impossible. But before we get to Michael, let's see what the current ladies have to say about God doing the impossible in our lives. Welcome, ladies.
Hello there.
Great to have this gorgeous looking panel here with us today. Thank you so much.
We love being here.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I can't wait to hear what everybody has to say about the impossibility. Is it possible that with God, nothing is impossible? What do you think?
Absolutely. This is by far one of my favorite topics.
Really?
Yes, because being raised by a single mom, my mom would always tell me to do something and it would be the opposite of what I wanted to do.
Shocking.
And I would challenge her, but now I understand and identify that was a gift inside of me. I actually heard a podcast the other day, and it was by T.D. Jakes, and he said, the most dangerous thing that we can do in life is to live behind a title. And that is because we put a period after our name when God made us with a comma. And our job is to identify and find all the things that God has inside of us. He already put them in there before the foundations of the earth. But our job is to extract them and have them come out. So instead of a period, living with a comma, and that means that we can do all things.
Right, with God.
Absolutely.
Right, we can't forget that.
Only God.
Yeah.
Only God.
Right.
I love that. Well, and it's funny because I was listening to a minister too. We're always all in the Word. I just love it. I get here and I get so challenged. Iron sharpening iron, right?
Yes.
But he was breaking down that, you know, we hear that scripture, nothing is impossible with Christ. And we all believe that, right? I mean, there's nothing. But he says, you know, there's two ways to look at that. There's no thing. You can break that down, no thing. He says, but also, he said, I'm going to change it up today. And he says, I'm going to tell you that there is something impossible with God. And you're sitting there thinking, what is this? And he holds up a blank piece of paper, and it was nothing. There is nothing impossible. And so he said this, and I've just got to quote this because I get chills even saying, he goes, you know, you may not get the thing, you may not get everything, but it is impossible to get no thing.
Wow.
And I just love it because when it says there is nothing, so when that means when we go to pray, what hits me is it is impossible to get nothing after I have prayed. If I go and I fast, it is impossible for him not to give me nothing, because nothing, it's impossible for him to do nothing. He has to do something. Isn't that powerful though?
So good.
Now, the question for me is, when I think nothing is impossible, well, is that a blanket check for me? I can do all. Well, I can go get $1 million and I'm going to get it. I don't know. Those are questions that I ask myself. So what does it mean that nothing is impossible for God, that I can accomplish what He has for me, not what I have for me or anyone else has for me? So yes, nothing is impossible as long as it's in alignment with God's will.
Absolutely.
I think that's so good, and I think that brings up the whole stewardship thing, and how all of the things on earth, our children, our jobs, money, they're all the Lord's, and it's really all about our stewardship. And so, as the Bible tells us, to whom much is given, much is required. People always think like the word is requested. It's actually required. So the more He gives us, the more He requires of us. And so we have to be really careful, I think, because then He can set things that we think, like I'm doing things in my life that I never thought God would put me in charge of. And He keeps, I feel like, whispering that, well, you've done a good job. So keep your eyes on me. Keep remembering it's all mine. Not one bit of this is yours. And that these people that you're stewarding over are mine. And I love them just as much as I love you. So I think it's a stewardship issue when it comes to
Do you think there's a bit of a stumbling block, though, sometimes for people who take that verse so literally, like you were kind of referencing, Jeanette, when we say, well, nothing is impossible, so I can jump off that cliff.
Right.
And I'm not going to die because God said nothing is impossible. What does it really mean then if we can't, and we know that we can't take it literally every time, and I want to even talk later on about where that verse is taken out of context so that we're sure about where it is, but how can we be cautious about really taking that verse too literally?
Right, well, I think about that God does not abide by the imperfect or the irrational. So irrational is I'm going to jump off a cliff because I can do it. Well, that's irrational. God does not abide by the irrational or the imperfect. At least that's how I can interpret it.
And you know, I take it from when Jesus was fasting for 30 days.
I was just about to say that.
Right? And I mean, the enemy came to him and says, well, why don't you turn that stone into bread? He kept trying to get him to appease his flesh. And to me, this is all a heart issue.
He was testing God too, and God said, don't put me to the test.
Right, but he was testing his pride. He was testing his will, because he was about his Father's will. And I think that's where we've got to all come to, you know, is that we are about God's Father. But I think there's people that's out there watching today that they're in the middle of circumstances that seem impossible, that things look dead. I mean, whether if it's their finances, whether if it's their marriage, whether if it's their children, and they're sitting there going, somebody give me some hope that with God all things are possible, that though it may look dead, that God can still speak life in it. And we're trying to say that yes, He can, that God is that kind of God, that nothing is too big for Him. But don't you think you have to pray, believing, expecting that God is going to come through? No matter if it's our way, it's what I just said. It may not be the thing. It may not be everything, but it's going to be His thing. And I think that's what this is all about.
It has to be God's will.
It
has to be His will. I think, you know what, if all things are possible, someday I'm going to sing like Carolyn. Right? It's like, no.
Not gonna happen, right?
No. God did not equip me with that voice. He did not give it to me. I pretty much have to stick to karaoke. That is it. So,
listen, I can't even do that.
It's all right.
She can
There's
do
a lot
that.
of background on it. So, but He did equip me with different gifts. And it's supposed to be to glorify Him. That's it. It's all about glorifying Him. I said this the other night when I was teaching somewhere. I said, everything He gives us, any gift, any talent, any blessing, any time He lets us think with the mind of Christ, anytime He downloads something to our spirit, it's to glorify Him. It is not for us. It is not for us to start being like, oh, look what I did. All things are possible because of God. And, you know, it's Christ in you, the hope of glory. It's Christ in you that gives you those gifts, gives you those talents, gives you everything. I am nothing without Him. But Jesus plus nothing is everything. So when we have Him, when we have the hope of glory, and we are able to, like, walk in those gifts, and you know, just like I want Carolyn's voice, I don't have it. I want my sister's ability to bake cookies. I burn them. There's just things I'm not great at. But God gave me a mouth and I can speak. So there you go.
You do that well.
I think there's a major component that's missing. Is how to identify God's will. And that is through prayer and through fasting. So many times the disciples went to Jesus and said, but this demon didn't come out, or this, and Jesus would say that only comes through prayer and fasting. So how do we walk in His will? And how do we, when you were talking about circumstances, how do we get a strategy for that, right? 2017, January, we were given 30 days to get out of our house. I was like, what? was freaking out. I mean, totally did not know what to do. And we just walked it out, had to do what we had to do, and we left, and God began to strategically tell me in my spirit that we were gonna get a new house. And I was like, Lord, but I don't have the money. And before, I mean, no lie, 2 months later, we put a contract on a house, and this is why. I'm telling you, this is why. Number one, we were surrounded by people that said, you got this, God has you, you're not homeless, He is for you, He's not against you. Then number two, I sat down with the Lord and my bank account and the calendar. And He showed me strategically how I was going to extract the down payment for this house that I needed by the time I closed. And I sat there and I went to my husband. It was so funny because I went to the negotiations and I was very serious. And what's funny, it was written on the other side of a coloring sheet for the kids. So the girl was like, good job negotiating on your coloring sheet, you know? But man, He is a God that will give you the strategies of what you need. But it takes the heart of a person, like you said, servanthood, but also obedience. Right. Obedience will always give you something on the other end. He might give you a little piece of the puzzle, and I might go to Carolyn's house and she gives me the other piece. Or I might go to your house and you give me the other piece. And then you've got this gorgeous mosaic, this amazing, wonderful piece that you go, God, you're talking about I could do all things that were impossible because you're a good God and you work through people and you work in heaven and on earth. It's so amazing.
So where does anybody know where the verse in Luke comes from, what the context is, where it says with God all things are possible? Does anybody know it?
Yes, it was when the angel told Mary that she was going to be expecting as a virgin, and she had gone to speak to Elizabeth. And Elizabeth was also expecting with John. And it sounds like Mary, when you read the text, it sounds like Mary was doubting a little bit. And the angel had to express, well, notice that Elizabeth is expecting and she's rather old to be expecting, but this happened. So it's almost as he was instilling faith in her by saying that phrase.
Yeah. I almost thought that she didn't doubt the way that I read it. I don't know, Jeanette. I always felt like she just said, well, what's next? Okay, I'm going on. I'm going to visit my cousin or aunt, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I think it was cousin.
Cousin Elizabeth. And she just, with God, all things are possible. That wasn't what she said, but it was what the angel said. But it's kind of like, okay, once we know that, then we take the next step. Like you so beautifully said, Giselle, then if it's really true, and it is in His will, then God is going to make it happen. And obviously that was in His will for Jesus to be.
But over 365 times did God have to say, do not be afraid.
Yeah,
do not fear.
That's true.
I'm telling you, God knew. That gives me peace when I read that, because it lets me know that He knew I was going to feel fear. He knew that I was going to be in the midst of something going, oh God, where are you? It doesn't feel good, And He's going, but do not be afraid, for I am with you, And it's like, okay, I got it. And, it's funny because I was reading about Elijah this week when they were having their greatest famine. 3 years they had not had rain. And what did he do? He went up on the mountain, said that he got his head in between his legs, almost like in the fetal position, and began to pray. And what I love about that scripture, it so motivated me because I reread it this morning, is it said he sent his servant, and he goes, go and see. I'm going to pray. He was expecting. He goes, go and see. And so he came back and says, what'd you see? And he said, nothing. So he says, well, go back again, because I know with God all things are nothing is impossible. So you've got to go back. You're seeing it wrong. He went 6 times. And it said on the 7th time he came back, and what did he say? He said, I see a cloud the size of a hand. And it said Elijah jumped up and said, run down the mountain. It says that he was so excited he outran the aphids.
Wow. Yes.
He was, and it was like he was wanting to scream, get him ready. But what I love about that is out of that something that looks so small to man, it said there became a downpour. And see, those are the scriptures that just excite my spirit, because in man's eyes, it's what we were talking about. In humans' eyes, humans can't make it happen. But with God, see, that's the key. With God. Not, if I do, tell God, you sit down, I got it from here. It's with God. Him taking over, us trusting Him, us being obedient to Him. all things are possible.
His grace is sufficient for us.
Yeah.
His power is made perfect in
Yeah.
our weakness. I think about college. Oh my goodness. I was so bad in college. But anyways, I think about college. I took a health class and I thought I was prepared for this presentation that I had to give. And everybody had to do a presentation on eating disorders. This was what we gave. And I'll never forget showing up to the class and I saw all these people with slideshows and boards and I was just like, oh, I'm way underprepared, right? I mean, I just remember going in and I sat there and I started getting anxious and I just sat there and prayed and I was like, Lord, you have got to help me with this. You have got to help me with this. And I got up to give my presentation. I had 5 slides and I felt like God was like, glorify me. So I got up and I told the story about I just started preaching. I wasn't a preacher at the time, but I started preaching and I started telling about how the Lord taught me how to eat healthy and I didn't have proper boundaries before I was saved and this is how the Lord and I'm in a secular college teaching doing this and I have to tell you, all the people with the boards and stuff, like they would be done and go sit down. When I got done with my presentation, everyone clapped and stood up, and I was like, 5 slides in Jesus. That's what I had. I had nothing. And I thought, oh my goodness, that was God.
Yeah.
Like I watched him come through for me, and he was like, "You glorify me." I got an A+, and I got a standing ovation, and I thought,
That is awesome.
I am so done with this class. That's all I knew, but I thought the Lord is so good. And I was weak. I wasn't prepared. I thought I was prepared and I wasn't. And he was like, just, my grace is sufficient. I've got this, just glorify me. And he does that in life. With him, all things are possible.
I have a similar situation, and there's nothing like seeing God show up. Like really seeing it happen. My husband and I, some of y'all know the story, we bought a company and we way overpaid and it was a nightmare and we had this huge job and literally the whole future of our company was dependent on this job working. And it was the Seminole County jail job. And even the guy who ran the jail, did know I was a person of faith afterward because we talked about it. But they were having this inspection and they kind of sprung it on us faster than they should have. And we had to have all these locks working. And it was literally like, the guy was coming through and I was literally praying, Lord, you have to have this work. And my tech was literally getting them to work as they were clicking them. It was, because if we did not perform on this job, we were not going to get this next job and the company probably would have went under. And I remember telling, our tech, that God was literally, and he's like, I don't even know how I did that. And I was like, it was God. He was fighting for us and it was just so vivid. And just like that, you'll never forget that. I will never forget those moments.
Okay, so I love success stories, and those are great, and those are going to encourage our viewers out there today. But, there is another side where we're faithful. We walk through the fire. We feel like, yep, God, with all things are possible, and God sometimes doesn't show up. Yeah. It might be months, it might be years, it might be when we get to eternity. We get to heaven. So how do we navigate that little bit more difficult path when God doesn't show up?
Can I say one thing real quick?
Yeah.
I would just say to then remember the times he did. Okay. Right? So we've had some of those where sometimes I've even said, Lord, you said I should do that. I felt like, and why is this failing? And so you just have to remember that he is faithful and there is a reason for whatever's going on.
And what hit me when you just said that is he always shows up.
That's right.
Yes.
Right.
And he's always there with you. And that's the thing, it's not about a feeling. It really is about a faith. And I think about that with Elijah. Remember, it was Elijah that he said, I'm going to get a double portion.
Yes.
But he died only having 13. And you know the devil's down there just going, ha, 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 you didn't get your double portion. And then they went into the land of dry, all that whole thing. And he went down there and they threw that dead bones into there. And all of a sudden, he came.
Rise.
Yes, and there was his 14.
Yes.
And it's like, it doesn't matter if it looks dead, it doesn't matter if it's 10 years later, God's promise will come to pass.
Right.
And we just have to really believe. I have chills right now. I'm telling you, girls, God's word is truth.
It doesn't return void.
It doesn't.
Right.
He is who he is, real. He is alive. It may not look how you think it's supposed to look. It's back to that whole thing. But God, I trust you. I say that all the time because it really is the issue. Is it doesn't feel good. It doesn't look like you. You can go through the whole thing. but I still trust you. That's somewhere in here. And that's how we get our joy. I didn't say happiness. Joy is different from happiness, but you can keep your
And
peace.
he is always there. And it's like when I'm glad you said that, Barbara, because that's the truth. We do feel like that. Like, why didn't you show up? And then you realize he is there. Sometimes he's quiet.
Right.
Sometimes
Right.
he's very quiet. And he just wants us to remember. And I think I keep hearing, humble yourselves under my mighty hands. In due time, I'll lift you up. In due time. And our time is not God's time.
That's right.
Our time is not God's time. He did come in to my classroom at the right time, thank God. But sometimes our time is not his time, and it's not due time to be lifted up. And we
That's
have to
right.
recognize that. So.
Yeah, but for the suddenlies that happen, right? When we're talking about the suddenlies, there are seeds planted for years and years and years. And sometimes that watering happens with your own tears. And so if you think about a seed, when it goes into the soil, it's in darkness. It knows it's a seed. It knows it's supposed to be a humongous tree or a humongous fruit-bearing tree. But it has to trust that one day in the breaking, remember we've all been in labor, ouch, in the breaking, then this thing resurrects and this amazing tree begins to birth. But we understand and identify that yes, we can do all things through Christ who gives us strength. But when we are planted in the right soil and we begin to be a tree that bears fruit, the fruit is never for us. I'm a tree, I'm like this. Whatever. The actual fruit is for everybody else. And so that is where the suddenlies happen, but it's because it's been planted and planted and planted and planted. So if you're in that season of planting, it's okay, keep planting, because he is the best farmer ever.
We have talked about this before, but there might be some different and new listeners out there, viewers out there today, where we talk about healing and why God doesn't heal sometimes. When we say, nothing's impossible with God, I'm a quadriplegic, I have cancer, whatever it is, God's going to heal me. So how do we reconcile that when we know that there are times that God does not physically heal someone? What's the reconciliation there?
Interesting. There are in the scriptures, as I have read it, there are two types of healing. One is called iasis, which is the miracle working power of God. When we talk about nothing's impossible, we think about his omnipotence. He is all powerful. We're limited with our five senses, but he's unlimited. He's limitless, a limitless God. So when we talk about healing, there is that process that's called iasis. It's a miracle. But then there's another process that's called therapeuo, which is healing along the way. It's just healing along the way.
Are you believing this woman? How did we get a Greek scholar here? God has brought you across our path. Keep going. That is amazing.
So that therapeuo process takes a very long time, and sometimes in our limited being, we want to rush God. And sometimes we say, well, the healing has not come. It's not here. Where is it at? Where are you? Well, it's a therapeuo process.
And sometimes it doesn't finish until heaven.
Yes.
Exactly.
I heard that not long ago, and we're sad, but they're healed fully in heaven.
Absolutely.
And so, and that if we remember, right, that this little life we live is just a teeny blip, it's a blip on the screen for the Lord.
And can we talk about the spiritual healing too? That may be part of the therapy.
Comes from therapy.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. And so the spiritual healing might take place in someone where the physical healing doesn't take place. But with God, all things are possible, right? You have a closing verse or something that you can give us?
And it is found in Job 42, verse 2. And it says, I know that you can do all things and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted.
And that was Job talking.
Yes,
and look
that
what
was
happened to
Job.
Job, right? So our encouragement today for our viewers is to stay steadfast in your faith and continue to trust God and continue to know that yes, with God all things are possible, but there is a contingency plan there as well. We have to understand that it needs to be within the will of God. I mean, I'm just repeating what all the ladies said. I have learned so much from these ladies, and I always do. I get encouraged by their insights and their wisdom. They pray before they come about what they're going to share. We don't plan this ahead of time. It's just really cool to see how God brings these talented, gifted ladies across our paths to bless each one of you, to honor and glorify God and to give us the hope and encouragement that we all have in Jesus Christ. So one more time, thank you, ladies, each one of you. And thank you, viewers, for joining us today. We have more coming up, so stay with us.
Coming up next.
Most of the things I've ever done in my life, I never knew how I was going to do it, but with the grace of God and with the power of God to help me and my direction, he has always pointed me to the ways of making it happen.
You're watching Barbara Beck on Welcome Home, where we share life-changing stories filled with hope. You're watching Welcome Home, bringing you life-changing stories filled with hope.
Hey viewers, I'm glad that you're here with us today. We have an exciting kind of a topic that we're going to be talking about, and that's nothing is impossible with God. You know that, you believe that, and we have a guest with us here today who is living evidence of that. Lots of people told him, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. And he said, oh, yes, I can. With God, nothing is impossible. Michael Lattardi, former NFL player and author of the book, You Can't Do That, and you say, yes, I can.
Yes, I can.
Right?
Yes.
So happy to have you here with us today on the program.
Thank you so much.
Tell us, well, first of all, let's give a little shout out to Father John Gill. We love him. He's your father, right?
He's our father, yes, over at Holy Family Church, but he's also an incredible mentor and a great person.
I love him. He's a partner with us here. We show his some of his preaching on Sunday afternoons here at the station, and we just think he is the greatest guy. He's a character, right?
Oh, he sure is.
He is. He's a man of God.
Yes, he
All right,
is.
so tell us a little bit about your childhood, how you were brought up, and you did not ever believe you would be a football player, right?
Well,
Or did you believe you would?
I did.
You believed you would. Okay.
No one else did.
Well, why was that?
Let's see. Growing up, I had a really bad speech impediment, in fact.
Really?
Yeah, I stammered a lot, and they actually didn't know why. And I also read things backwards, so I was dyslexic. And back in the 70s, they really didn't know too much about dyslexia and speech impediments and things of that nature. So I figured it out with my mother that my thought process, my thinking process was so much quicker than my speech and my reading. So when I started to slow down and really concentrate on things that I was talking about, also I would memorize things, and when I memorized things, I would not have any issues. So I started to act, and I started to sing. And that's why guys like Mel Tillis, who was such a great singer, he had no problems because everything was memorized and everything became a rhythm of it. So I had to retrain myself how to speak, how to read.
But you had a Monsignor back when you were a child who was really an important influence in your life, maybe a mentor, so to speak?
Monsignor Bradley, he heard me sing. I was probably around 10 years old, and we were singing God Bless America at the end of his sermon, and he heard me sing, and he knew that I had a speech impediment, so he pulled me aside afterwards. I thought I did something wrong. I'm like, no, I didn't do anything. So he says, hey, I heard you sing. And I was kind of amazed, but I was in the war, and he started to tell me this incredible story about how he was a father. He started in 1941, and he was sent overseas, in fact, and he actually had someone in his battalion that had a speech impediment, but he sang like an angel, he said.
Interesting.
So he said, I want you to start singing for the choir. And I'm like 10 years old. I'm going, what? No, wait a minute, hold on. So finally, my grandmother, who went to church every single day, she goes, you have to join the choir. If Monsignor Bradley says,
right.
you have to join the choir. So I joined the choir, and it changed my life forever, because that was the only time that I was able to like communicate and really express myself fluently.
And it gave you some confidence too, I'm sure, right?
A lot of confidence,
Yeah.
There was no doubt about it. So if it wasn't for Monsignor Bradley to say, I want you to start singing, I probably would have never sang.
Now, do you still keep up with him?
You know, he passed away quite some time ago, but he's just an amazing, amazing person. He left such a legacy at St. Michael's Church in Long Branch. Beautiful, beautiful church there.
There are very few World War II veterans left. And so when I hear somebody speaking about one, I'm like, oh, I hope they're still around so that you could give him the kind of kudos that you just gave him. But he's hearing it from someplace else, right?
Yeah, and his story is amazing. If you go online and you Google him, Monsignor Bradley, there's a bunch of things on him. Yeah.
Okay, well, I didn't ask you this before, but sometimes people who have a great singing voice will just break out in song for us. Are you interested in singing God Bless America?
I would today, but I am so congested from the allergies today.
Okay, we'll give you a pass.
It had to be you.
Oh, I love that.
It had to be you.
I hear no congestion. I hear a beautiful, beautiful voice. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Okay, so you're a little boy now, and you're wanting to play football, and you're not that big, right? You're not like the NFL players that I've met in the past are kind of big guys.
At that time, I was probably about 125 pounds, like soaking wet. And I turned to my dad, who was an all-state and all-county, all-shore football player.
Wow.
And I used to go in his room, and there was a scrapbook there, and I would open up at this scrapbook, and I said, wow, that's my dad, and his name was on all these articles and stuff, and that's really what inspired me to be a football player. I mean, I was like 120, like I said, I was skinny as a rail, and I just wanted to play football, and I didn't know how I was gonna get there. Most of the things I've ever done in my life, I never knew how I was going to do it, but with the grace of God and with the power of God to help me and my direction, he has always pointed me to the ways of making it happen.
So what did your dad say? Your dad knows you're kind of little. Your dad probably wasn't a little guy. Was he big?
No, he was a huge
guy,
strong guy.
Okay, so does he say,
very
Michael,
strong.
no, you're not able to play football. You're too small.
Well, he was a Korean war hero, in fact, and he was an MP. And when he spoke, everyone listened.
People listen. Yes, I can imagine.
And he was like, "Hey, I think you could be a better baseball player," like that. I was like, "Okay." So I started to play baseball, and I really excelled. In fact, people thought I should have probably been a pro baseball player rather than a football. But at that time, Italian family, middle class, they didn't really know how to save back then, I guess, for college. So I had to find a way to trade football for an education.
Right.
Because at that time, they were definitely giving away a lot more football scholarships than they were ever giving away baseball scholarships.
Sure.
So I sort of switched and I said to Dad, I said, hey, I know you're probably not going to like this, but I want to stick with football, but all the way. And he goes, okay, let's do it.
Good. So you got encouragement from your dad. He thought it was okay.
Oh yeah. From always, from when I was little, always.
Your dad believed
He
in
would
you.
always say that. Listen, tardies never say no, like that, and that was always in my mind and stuff like that.
So you became a kicker in high school.
Yes, I played linebacker.
Wow.
I played defensive back and wide receiver. So about my junior year, I was told, hey, listen, you're too slow to be a defensive back. You're too slow to be a wide receiver, although you have really good hands. But I think you should start maybe looking to like a specialty.
Okay.
I'm like, okay. So one day I was kicking a soccer ball, And one of my coaches says to me, he goes, hey, can you kick a football? I was like, I don't know. And he holds it, and I kick it through, and he's like, well, you're our new kicker now.
Amazing.
I'm like, okay.
Amazing.
And that's how it all started.
That served you well. That got you into college, right? You had your college scholarship because of that?
Full ride scholarship, and I actually went to Kutztown University with Hall of Famer Andre Reed, who was my housemate at the time, and he's the one who talked me into going there too as well.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
And so how did you get into the NFL after college?
Well, I got really lucky. About my senior year, I was kicking on a football field, and and those moments when you reach up and you look at the skies and you say, God, please give me direction. Please give me hope here and help, because all my friends were at the beach and I'm here working like nonstop. And I remember this one moment. I was like in tears, crying because I was working out so hard. I was doing bleachers and running up and down the stands. And this one guy, he pulled me aside. He goes, I see you here every day. And I said, yes. And he goes, why? I said, why? Because I have it in my heart, in my belly. I want to get a scholarship. I wanted to do well. And that man was Jim Garrett. And Jim Garrett was a Dallas Cowboy scout for like 30 years.
Wow.
And he lived in the next town over. And every day that I was there, he was scouting someone that was a possible NFL player. I never knew this. I was just at the right place at the right time. But I think, like I said, God gives things to people.
That's right.
All the time. And they work hard and you will succeed. So I'm there and he goes, I want you to come over to my house. And I thought that was kind of weird at first because I'm like, who's this guy asking me over to his house? But I get there the next day and guys like Sammy Mills and his son, Jason Garrett, who is now the head coach for the Dallas Cowboys, he was my holder. And and all these guys that are potential NFL ball players were in the side yard of his yard. And I'm like, what am I doing here? But he was a mentor. He was a teacher. He was an incredible man.
And he believed in you.
He believed in me because I had heart.
Right.
And that's the biggest thing that he said, no matter what, I'd rather have one guy that has heart than 10 guys who have talent because I can teach you.
Yeah. Where did the heart come from, Michael?
I think with growing up, having the speech impediment, having these issues, being teased as a kid, and just wanting to really succeed.
Yeah.
I had a great conversation with Drew Brees during the NFL Pro Bowl.
Okay.
I always said to him, I said, I wonder, what made you become who you are? And he goes, it's funny you asked me that because I know that you have a speech impediment. And I said, yes. He goes, do you see the scar here? And he has, and he has a birthmark on his face. And he goes, kids used to tease me about that all the time. I said, you? He goes, yeah. He goes, they used to tease me. And so I needed to find an outlet. I needed to find something, and football was my outlet.
Coming up next.
I said, I'm just a writer, director, producer, and I'd like you to have Tim Curry do my film. And she goes, you got him.
No way.
And then she goes, who else? I said, Jim Belushi. She literally gets on the phone.
No.
This is how Hollywood works. She gets on the phone and she goes, hi, it's so-and-so. I need Jim. Okay, great. Thank you very much. You have Jim.
You're watching Barbara Beck on Welcome Home, where we share life-changing stories filled with hope. You're watching Barbara Beck on Welcome Home, where we share life-changing stories of hope.
I think it's interesting how God can use those things that we see as obstacles in our lives to really help us to become overcomers. And that's absolutely what you are. And the fire in your belly, wherever it came from, whether it's being bullied or whether it was having a dad who encouraged you, God used it for his good to help you see with him, nothing is impossible.
That's so true.
What else have you done with your life? Because you've done some really cool things. I mean, I've read videos, watched videos and read articles about you. What's one of the most kind of cool things that you think you've done?
Well, there's life after football. The NFL really stands for not for long. And so being there for only a few seasons, a lot of incredible benefits come, of course, after that. I've been able to get into something that I've always wanted to do. My father, when he was passing away on his bed, and he turned to me, and at that time, I was emotionally drained, and he goes, God doesn't give things to people that they can't handle.
Wow.
And that really, that really came into my heart. And he goes, you should be doing something that you love, and I know that you love filmmaking. And at that time, I had a very successful, and still do have a very successful sports publication, and I had my first son. And so I'm just like, Dad, I have everything. I have a beautiful home, I've got a beautiful cars, I got a gorgeous wife, I've got a son now. I said, well, what can I possibly do that is beyond this? He goes, make your films.
Because that was your passion, and he knew that.
And he knew that. And so I decided to make my films.
That is so cool. And so what kind of films have you done?
Well, my first film I made was a short animated film. It was called Once Upon a Christmas Village. And I'm extremely thrilled to say that it won 96 awards on the film festival circuit. And it was crazy how it took a life of its own. But I think it did because of Tim Curry and Jim Belushi. Now, you're probably thinking, how'd you get Tim Curry and Jim Belushi to be in your movie? Well, it's a great story. It's a funny story. I kept on sending it to their agent, and their agent said, send it back, unsolicited. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this isn't gonna work. And so, as a kid growing up in college, I took a job during the summer for Federal Express. So I wind up keeping the outfit for just a lark for maybe one Halloween or something. So I literally get dressed in a FedEx outfit. I fly all the way out to LA and put the whole uniform on. I bring the package to Innovative Artists, and I said, I'd like to see so-and-so, and they said, okay, come on in, and she comes in, and I hand it to her, and I said, Federal Express package. She goes, well, why couldn't you leave it at the desk? I said, because there's something very special in here. And she goes, you're not the FedEx man, are you? I said,
wow.
I said, no, I'm not, but I'm a writer, director, producer that's been trying to get this script to you. And she goes, you wait right here. And she brings in her top agents, and she goes, who's this person? And they're all like, the FedEx guy. And I'm like, no. I said, I'm just a writer, director, producer, and I'd like you to have Tim Curry do my film. And she goes, you got him.
No way.
And then she goes, who else? I said, Jim Belushi. She literally gets on the phone.
No.
This is how Hollywood works. She gets on the phone, she goes, hi, it's so-and-so. I need Jim. Okay, great. Thank you very much. You have Jim.
How in the world did you have the courage to do something like that? I mean, that's the title of your book. You can't do that. I'm telling you right now, Michael Atardi, you can't do that. You can't dress up like a FedEx man. You can't go to Hollywood and do that. And you did it, and your answer would be, yes, I can, Barbara.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So you won 96 awards for that film.
Yes,
Did you meet Jim Belushi, obviously, and Tim Curry?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What are they like?
they're great guys. They really embraced the film because of the fact that had a lot of humor to it. And Jim told me this great story that the reason why he said yes to it is because I had like a little bit of an edgy Santa Claus in it, which is he's
That's
very
who
funny.
he was, right?
He was like the dad driving the car, and they're like, "Don't let me stop! Don't let me pull this car over! If I pull this car over," so it's like Santa going, "Don't let me pull this sled over," like that to the elves. So he started laughing. He goes, "My very first job was in acting, was playing Santa Claus." I'm like, "You got to be kidding me!" And he tells the story about how him and his brother, Jim and John, they literally worked in a burger place for the uncle. And if you ever seen Saturday Night Live, cheaper, 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 like that whole skit was a real skit based on Jim and John's uncle.
Right.
And then the uncle turned to Jim one day and said, "Why don't you do what your brother does? It seems easy. Just go there and act." He goes, "Here's your first job. Put on a Santa suit."
Unbelievable.
And he told me his story, and I just thought it was great. Yeah.
You know, as you're talking, I wanted to ask you who your most interesting person is. It might have been Jim. Was it Jim Belushi, or are there other people that you've met that are just kind of outstanding in your life?
Oh, wow. There's so many. I mean, I don't want to sound like, oh, wow, like.
No, I want you to. I want to hear who you met. I'm interested.
I mean, I had an amazing experience with Tom Hanks. Also, one of my very dear friends is Michael Strahan.
I love him.
Hall of Famer.
Yes.
Good Morning America.
Right, right.
Great guy. We still hang out and keep in touch and stuff.
You do?
And, yeah.
Well, next time he's in town, would you please send him my way? Come on, Michael.
I will.
You can become my new best friend if you send me some people like that who have stories about Jesus. I mean, are there any Christians along the way that you've met that have really impacted your life?
My goodness, there's like so many. I mean, really, I mean,
Drop some names. It's okay to name drop with me. I'm fine with that.
I had a chance to spend some great time with Paul Sorvino, actor Paul Sorvino.
Yeah.
The godfather of my third son is Federico Castelluccio. He played Furio in The Sopranos.
Okay, I did not ever watch that, but
I know.
I'm hearing you. Sorry.
He's a great guy, though. He's like the opposite of.
And that's your
that
child's
show.
godparent.
Yes, it is.
My father.
Yeah. No. He's a real godfather.
You have lived, I bet. You have lived a very colorful life. There's a story, I'm sure it's in the book, but it's about that I saw in one of your videos that you produced, that you wrote, directed, produced. I'm sure you did it all. Yeah. But it's about your trip to Cozumel during Hurricane Wilma.
Yes.
And how you, with another "you can't do that, yes I can" stories, is that you got all these Americans out of Cozumel who were stuck there because of the hurricane. Tell us a little bit about that story, because I love this.
Okay, well, it was a crazy time. I mean, we actually won that trip. My father-in-law won that trip, and I at a scuba diving show. And we were excited. We're like, "Oh my goodness, we're going to go to Cozumel now. We're going to go diving for
Did
a
you
few
know how to
days."
scuba dive?
Oh yeah.
Before that?
Yeah,
Okay,
no,
you already knew.
Yeah, no, I'm like a serious.
Of course you did.
I'm a serious diver. I love to dive. And
You skydive too?
no, I will not do that because my wife said I can't.
Okay, well, good. Obey your wife. That's good. All right, back to Cozumel.
So she, so I wind up telling my wife that, hey, we got this trip to Cozumel, and my wife is like, "Go, you and my father will have a great time." I said, "Great." So we go, and the day we're there, we get into the water, we're diving the first day, and we're like, "Oh, this is like paradise." And then we get out of the water, and all of a sudden this person comes up and goes, "Are you going home?" I'm like, "Why? I just got here." And they're like, "Well, a hurricane's coming," like that. I'm like, "Oh yeah, really? Okay, yeah." I'm thinking, it's just gonna breeze by and stuff like that. So I turned to my father-in-law. I go, "Do you want to weather the storm, or you want to head out?" He goes, "Well, maybe we'll try to weather a storm." I said, "All right, great."
Another day of scuba diving.
Yeah. So we spent another day scuba diving, having a great day, and all of a sudden, Hurricane Wilma comes, and it literally hovers Cozumel for over 24 hours. It did so much damage.
Oh, wow.
There were 3 hotels that were right on the shore that were just down to rubble. There was a point that we were helping the dolphin experience there, like move dolphins into our pool.
Wow.
But it was pretty scary. I mean, because they had us downstairs in this this holding cellar area, and just the flooding was happening and everything. But it sounded like about like 1,000 cats, just like you know, that real eerie like
Yeah, the wind.
like that. Yeah, and it's like wow, you know. And I never thought I would experience that. You
Yeah,
know,
not a
but-
New Jersey boy. You would never experience a hurricane, right?
So so we just had to find ways to survive. You know, there were some senior citizens there. There were children there. They were out of formula. They were out of food, water.
So you're running to get these people. There are 100 and something Americans that you're trying to get them out of Cozumel.
Yes.
This is the story. This is the part of the story I want you to tell, because you were serving. You in your heart, this fire in your belly says, we got to get out of here, and I got to get all these people out of here
I
with
needed
me.
to, because it was really bad, and I really wanted to help all these people
Right.
get out of there. It
Right.
wasn't me. I would have stayed behind as long as I got them out. There was this one couple that they needed their medication, and there was like
So they needed to get out.
nothing in town. So
The funny part, where
I
you
saw
have
the
this
phone.
credential. What are your credentials to get people out?
I saw the phone, and the phone that I found, I spliced the wires together, and I literally got on the phone, and a friend of mine knew Anderson Cooper, and so I get on the phone with CNN and Anderson Cooper, and I'm literally giving the news from this payphone that's been spliced,
Right.
and then I had to unsplice it because the Mexican government didn't want me talking.
Sure.
And so it was very like cloak and dagger kind of thing for a few days. But then it was ironic, when on my passport, I had this congressional sticker that I used to work on Capitol Hill. Back in college, I did an internship for a few congressmen and some senators up there, and I kept the sticker. So when we were going up to the thing, I pull out my sticker and I said, I'm here with the U.S. Congress. I got to get all 125 people out. And the guy with machine guns and cards, I mean, they were all over. They go ahead, go. And we literally got on a continental
amazing.
flight.
Yeah.
And I got all 125 people out.
You are amazing.
No, it was crazy, but it was God sent.
was
There was
God,
no
right.
doubt about it, because I don't know why he said yes to that lousy sticker, but
Right,
there was
right.
over about 300 people that were still trying to get.
But you
get
got
on
your
the flight.
Americans out of there, and
Yeah.
God told you to do that, and you said, God said go, and Michael Attardi made it happen. You can't do that, Michael Attardi, and Michael's answer will be, yes, I can. His book that he's written about all of his different experiences, it'll be a great read for you. Michael, thank you so much for being here with us today. What an encouragement you are. And viewers, we just hope that the discussions that we have here will help you to see the power of Jesus in your life. And because our Lord is in us, he can make a difference, not only in our lives, but in the lives of those around us. You know, it's one thing for us to talk the talk, and I've said it before, we do it pretty well around here. But after we hear about Jesus and we grow in him and we have that foundation, what's next? Well, it's time for us to realize that with God, truly, nothing is impossible. You can't do that, everybody's going to say to you. Your answer is, yes, I can, with God's help. We need to believe, like our guest today, Michael Attardi, that God is in the business of empowering his people to go out and be more than they ever dreamed of being for the kingdom, not for us, for the kingdom. So let's mobilize our families, our friends, our people, and do something to make a difference in someone's life. Maybe it's just one person, but go and serve. Be the hands and feet of Jesus, and stay with us. We have more coming up.
I had a terrible dream the other night. It woke me up out of a sound sleep and had me shaken like a leaf. I dreamt that I was on the top of a roof with a few people. And the next thing I knew, my daughter Sarah walked straight off the top and was plunging to the ground. It was almost as if she was in slow motion as I desperately screamed her name, then immediately closed my eyes and I just kept praying, God provide a pool, God provide a pool, God provide a pool. I opened my eyes to look down and see Sarah land in an above ground pool and stand up as if she hadn't jumped at all. Oh, my friends, this dream had me shaking so hard. When I woke up, I had to go in and hug my daughter. I kept whispering to her, I love you so much. I love you so much. I'm sure she was like, okay, Mama, can I go back to sleep now? When she woke up and was eating breakfast, I said, Sarah, the dream was terrifying. When I saw you jump, I closed my eyes and I realized all I could do was pray. And then I thought, yes, that's it. It's never too late to pray. My friends, has someone you love jumped off a spiritual roof of some sort? Are you in the middle of a spiritual fall or pit? Do you feel yourself sinking or falling? Let me say to you right now, take heart. It's not too late to pray. It's not too late to ask God for a pool to land in. I don't know what in my subconscious mind made me think that an above-ground pool would save someone who fell off a skyscraper. But that was what I prayed for over and over, and in my dream, God made it so. Guess what? God saves us over and over from our falls that should take us out. It's called grace. His perfect and amazing grace provides pools for us when we make stupid leaps and falls in the natural. I feel like God wanted me to tell people, it's never too late. It's never too late to pray. It's never too late to believe for a miracle. It's never too late to ask God to catch us from some fall. It's never too late to allow God to reach his loving arm into the pit that we've flung ourselves into and pull us out. Oh, friends, it's never too late. Miracles happen sometimes in the 11th hour so that no one will get the credit and the glory but God. Jesus did this with his friend Lazarus in the Bible. Even though the world thought it was too late, since Lazarus had already died, Jesus showed up right on time and raised his friend from the dead so that God could get the glory. Are you at the 6th or 7th hour wondering if God will come? Let me encourage you to never give up. It's never too late to pray and believe, because trust me, our Jesus is always on time. For more on renewing your mind in the Word of God, visit us at Unforsaken Women or check out our website, unforsakenwomen.com.
I hope you enjoyed our program today. Sometimes when we take a Bible verse out of context, we lose some of the original meaning. The particular verse in Luke where it says, with God, all things are possible, well, that was actually an angel of the Lord speaking to Mary about the fact that she was pregnant. I imagine her first thought might have been, no, Lord, impossible. But with God, we know that all things are possible, even though many times God carries out his will through ordinary means and ordinary people. Well, later on in the book of Luke, Satan tries to tempt Jesus to throw himself off the temple, saying that the angels will keep him from harm. But Jesus said, don't put the Lord your God to the test. Well, let me ask you this. If Jesus had chosen to jump, could God have caught him in midair and kept him from harm? Yes, of course. With God, all things are possible. But at the same time, we're told not to test God. We are called to believe, to trust. I'm not going to foolishly jump off a cliff because of a verse in Luke that says, with God, all things are possible. God might choose to save me, but more than likely not, because we know God allows natural consequences to prevail in most cases. But could he do a miracle? Of course, at any time, but not if we test him. That's forbidden in Scripture. In life, there are impossible situations, impossibilities, but with God, are all things possible? I choose to believe the Word of God and say simply, yes. And that, dear friends, is our note of hope for today. Thanks so much for joining us, and God bless you.
You just watched Welcome Home with Barbara Beck, a Good Life 45 original production. That makes you a part of our Hope team here on Good Life 45, where hope happens.